This episode of iPad Pros is sponsored by Agenda 19. Learn more at www.agenda.com. Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
Clear that they rebuilt these apps for touch, and I find Final Cut especially just works better when I'm working with my hands. Even recently, I've just started pacing while I'm editing because I can do that. Which is kind of weird, but it's working for me. So I'm almost exclusively just using my hands, and I find that it works better that way.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. Joining me today is Riley Hill, whose work you can find on SlatePad.org. Riley has been working on the iPad for many years now, and in this episode, we discuss his history with the iPad and some of his favorite iPads and iPad editions over the years, his current iPad setup, that now includes both the 11 and 13-inch M4 iPad Pro. Then we dive fully into all the apps and workflows he does on his iPads. Since recording this episode, I have received my M4 11-inch iPad Pro with Nano-Texture. I did downgrade to the Wi-Fi only model and have been very impressed with improvements to personal hotspot and handing that off automatically when in need. But needless to say, I will have many, many more thoughts to share on this new generation of iPad and the Nano-Texture display. But initial impressions are amazing, and I really do love the Nano-Texture both inside and outside. Is making a huge difference for me. I also did visit the Apple Store and got to play around with the new Magic Keyboard and 13-inch iPad Pro. And I have to say, the new Magic Keyboard is really remarkable. There is something about that MacBook keyboard internally that makes everything just feel nicer. And while the exterior is the old material, I noticed it less because of all the aluminum inside. This is something I'm not even tempted by though, and I'm still very happy using the headless MacBook Air as my one and only keyboard for iPads and the Apple Vision Pro, as you may have heard on episode 200 when Devin Dundee interviewed me about the MacPad and how it is the perfect iPad accessory. Being able to use this one keyboard and trackpad with multiple iPads either individually or at the same time. I could even use 3 iPads kind of sitting next to each other with this one input device and mouse between all of them. It's pretty remarkable. So listen to episode 200 if you have not yet. It was a really fun discussion with Devin. I really appreciate him conducting that interview with me. So the 13-inch iPad Pro that I got to play around with is even more impressive than the 11-inch iPad Pro. And it does also make me appreciate, though, just how thin the 11-inch iPad Pro is. While not as thin as the 13, it is still very close, and I really do appreciate just how the engineering went into making the 11-inch what it is. With that said, I am very eagerly awaiting the either 18 months for the next upgrade or 3 years for 2 upgrades from now for when I do decide to take the plunge and upgrade the big M1 iPad Pro to that new design. The 13-inch iPad is still huge, and I am super happy that I now have a modern small iPad Pro. And no, my usage of the super big 13-inch iPad Pro would not have been dramatically different from the M1 iPad Pro, and having a much smaller form factor with the 11-inch was the perfect thing for me right now. But wow, is that new 13-inch super thin, and more importantly, super light to hold. Anyways, I'll have many more thoughts to share in the coming episodes. If you want to support the podcast, the best thing to do is support today's sponsor, Agenda. I'll be sharing more about Agenda 19 later on in this episode, but for now, open up the App Store right now and download Agenda. You can learn more at www.agenda.com. My thanks again to Agenda for sponsoring this episode of iPad Pros. Early access to both iPad Pros and Vision Pros is available at patreon.com/iPad Pros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. My thanks to everyone that currently or has in the past supported the show. With that, here's my interview with Riley. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Riley.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I saw you over on Threads, which has been an interesting place to just kind of discover people recently. That algorithm seems to be popping up some interesting folks. So nice to meet you here.
Likewise, I've been following you for a minute as an iPad enthusiast. It's kind of hard not to run into you and what you do. So this is nice to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have quite a bit of many iPads in your life, an M4, 2 of them actually. Before we get to all of that,
I'm just curious. Tell me a bit about your day job. If you've managed to integrate the iPad in that work at all, or is the iPad purely for your side projects and your personal computer?
So, in my day job, I'm a software developer, currently working in consulting. So, the majority of my iPad use is really from a note taking perspective. I also do a lot or a fair amount of, I guess, what you call software architecture. So, designing applications more so than actually building them. So, there are a lot of diagrams that start on iPad and then get moved over to my company Mac. Um, so that's the main way iPad gets used day to day. I do find the occasional use for Swift Playgrounds as a prototyping tool. It's interesting to use it for that use, but that gets a little bit of use as well. But other than that, we have company issued Macs that we have to use at my current job. So uh, that's where I've been able to fit the iPad in.
Okay. Yeah, makes total sense. And then, as far as your history with iPad, when did you first start using it to get work done versus having it more be like an entertainment machine, which I think it started life for most people that way?
I've really kind of became more committed to doing work with it. Um, I think really with the 2018 iPad Pro was where I kind of started finally taking the idea seriously of like, okay, this thing can be used for more than just everyday things. And with that model, I ended up getting the 11 inch. I've been on the 11 inch or that size most of the time I've been on iPad, only because with the bigger iPad, it felt like before Stage Manager, the software wasn't really taking advantage of the bigger display, so it didn't make sense to buy the 12.9 for a while. And it was actually Stage Manager that convinced me to go back to the bigger size. And I guess from a total iPad perspective, like how I
Yeah.
started with that, when they announced it in 2010, I had talked myself out of getting it until like literally the day of release, and I woke up that morning and I was kind of like, you know what, I'll just go down to Best Buy, and if they have any, maybe I'll pick one up. And so I ended up I went to Best Buy thinking they opened at 9 and they opened at 10. So I get there at 9 and there's this line.
Yeah.
Oh my, great. So standing in line, and then like the news shows up and I'm like, man, like I don't want to I don't really want to be on camera for this at that time. So it was like hiding my face from the cameras,
Right.
which is ironic given what I do now. But yeah, that's kind of a high level iPad history, I guess.
Do you have any favorite iPads going back in history? Any like notable additions, either hardware, software that they've added, throughout the years?
I have a soft spot for the 10.5-inch iPad Pro. Something about that one. I think maybe it was the thin side bezels, or just how light it was. But that was a great one of my favorites.
I'm glad you said that because it's so perfect. It's the thin side bezels, they never went thinner than that for the home button, and they also released this lovely. I've got the leather. I still have this iPad. I'm
Oh,
hanging on
nice.
to it. It's 10.5. They released like a leather sleeve that had the Apple Pencil that you put in there, and the
Yeah,
sleeve also acted as like a good place to just put your iPad as you're working on maybe a table that's a little bit dirtier, and it was just such a perfect like package altogether.
I have one of those around here somewhere too. I think it's in this drawer. But
It was
those cases.
Yeah,
Sorry, not
it's
that
the
bad.
last gold iPad Pro, and I missed that color as an option as well.
Yeah, that was a great one. The iPad Air 2 is also a favorite just because, I'm unlike it seems like everyone else these days. I'm still on team, make everything thinner. So like
Yeah,
they made that one thinner than the Air, and it was like so that was really cool. And then of course, the 2018 was kind of like a felt like a sea change in iPad
for sure.
hardware. That was just it felt like they took it to the next level for sure on
Yeah,
that.
that second gen Pro, they did so much stuff display tech wise. They added a
Yeah.
True Tone and ProMotion. Like the displays in the second gen Pro is basically modern as far as all the niceties outside of like OLED and the tech itself outside of that.
Do you remember? Because I again, one of those things where I talked myself out of it and then did it. I got that first gen 12.9-inch Pro, and then what was it? 6 months, a year later, we had that 9.7-inch Pro that had better, like a
Yes,
better display.
it had.
Like it
That's
had,
when they added True Tone, I think. Yeah,
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 and that was just that was a weird spot to be in. Of like,
it
okay, I
was.
want these things, but not enough to buy a new one. But that was just kind of a
Yeah, and at some point, so I got a second gen Pro, and I was using it alongside my first gen, and the True Tone, it was driving me insane using it at the same time next to each other because the displays weren't matching in color. It's like, okay, I gotta upgrade both of these, don't I? Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, and yeah, that Air 2 is so far ahead and just so snappy, and that's first multitasking with split screen. I think is what. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that one. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So anything you miss from earlier iPad models? So if, like, for instance, I really miss the old smart cover design and just, the back's nice and clean.
Yeah.
You had Evernote doing crazy things with their flashcard app where you can peek and just look at the next answer kind of thing, like stuff like that. Yeah.
So first, I would say, yeah, I missed that smart cover design. I missed for a minute. Remember, Apple was selling the back cover pieces. Like you could have the smart
Oh, that's right.
keyboard, and then you could buy the back separately. I wish there were more like accessories that weren't full cases, but were just kind of like magnetically attached to the back of the iPad or something.
Yeah.
But then to sidebar, I guess. You know, as I get more into audio stuff, the lack of the headphone jack.
Mm-hmm.
When they took it out of the iPhone, it's like, okay, if you squint, like, okay, I guess you could say space saving, sure. But then as the devices get bigger, you kind of just like, did you need to do that? Because there was a second there, I think before the 2019 or the first 16-inch Pro, there was a story about a survey Apple was sending out, kind of, and one of the questions was like, do you use the headphone jack on your Mac? So we kind of thought like, geez, they're gonna take it there too. Thankfully they haven't, but like it's a weird omission at this point, I feel like, on the bigger devices.
Yeah, that's what caused me to really. I skipped the 2018 model because it's like I was very bitter about the headphone jack because I would just plug my iPad for podcast recording. I'd use the audio output from the iPad, plug that directly into a Zoom H6, and then the microphone into the Zoom H6. And this move to USB-C, I had to get a Thunderbolt dock to like do something that was very simple before, and I was very bitter about that. I think.
Yeah, that's one.
The M4 iPad Pro, it may be thinner than the headphone jack. I don't know how they would even do that these days.
For the sake of thinness, I am willing to make that sacrifice, but
Yeah.
still just a little bitter about that. And I kind of secondarily, I guess, the position of the smart cover or the smart the contacts for the smart connector.
Oh yeah, versus the side being on the back.
Yeah, because we had that nice Logitech stand at one point. I don't know if you ever had that.
I had two of them. I had this great setup at my old day job at work. I had just went in the office. I slapped my two iPads down, and it was a slow charge. But if you're just working there, casually all day long, they'll keep a charge and do what it needs to do. And when I need to work or go to a meeting, I just grab it and then pop it. I love that thing. And I had a Bluetooth keyboard that I could just hit a button to switch between the two iPads. And it's just a lovely setup. Like, I just love that, the Logitech stand. So I do miss that, yeah. And the other thing about the side smart connector was I could use my 10.5-inch iPad Pro on the bigger smart keyboard. It would be, because the connector is all lined up and the keyboard would function. So if you just want, like, to just pop it on there for a second, you could do it. And yeah, so that was a nice kind of, like, thing you could do with that by sharing that.
That's interesting. I never tried that.
Yeah. But yeah, I missed the side as well. You did see we have charging stands once again. Third parties are starting to be able to. I don't know if that's a policy change from Apple, or if they finally just decide let's do it.
That's kind of been my hesitation. I've seen that, and I don't know if it's one of these things that Apple's going to be like, oh, we didn't approve it and like brick it. So I'm not jumping to spend 100, 120, whatever
Yeah,
it is.
I'm super excited that that's a thing again, though. It's like okay,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but I do want one. I need one, obviously, for the M4.
Yeah.
So,
But the bummer there is you got to buy a different. You have 2 iPad Pros. It'd be nice with the old iPad Pro stand, the side smart connector.
Mm-hmm.
Both iPads fit that because it's just like plops down on it. Yeah, old iPads, good times.
Yeah.
They still run most of. Like I have my iPad 2. It still boots up.
I bet it runs relatively well, right?
Yeah, my original iPad sadly does not turn on anymore. At least one of them doesn't. I have 2 of those old ones. Something fried in there. Yeah.
I think at some point Apple crossed the threshold of like maybe when they got to the X chips. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I asked about whether or not it still runs well because one of the common complaints people have with iPad is like, oh, they're overpowered, but it's like you get that overpowering, that it being overpowered is what keeps them in use for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right?
Yeah,
like
my 2017 10.5 inch iPad Pro, 7, 8 years old, still runs fairly well. I don't have it charged up as often as I should because of the lightning connector, and I have little of those cords left in my house. But yeah, it runs great still. Another thing I miss is the old photo frame button on the lock screen. That was such a nice little thing.
I don't know when they got rid of that. Yeah, I was looking the other day. I'm like, wow.
It's early on. They nixed that for whatever reason. Yeah. So what's your current iPad setup these days?
Okay. My primary iPads. So my primary mobile device, I don't generally like to call it a laptop replacement because it's not a narrative
It's your primary computer? Is that accurate in saying? You have a Mac as well?
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah, I'm a gadget guy. I love tech. So like, I'm always going to try to have like one of everything.
Right.
So that's just me. But I would say, so my main mobile device is the 13-inch M4 iPad Pro. I did finally bump up to 1 terabyte, and then I did cellular. That one's in silver. But that's my main, like, I do kind of the side project work on this device.
Mm-hmm.
I also have the 11-inch M4 iPad Pro. That one's in space black. It's 512. Also with cellular, and that's what comes with me to work. And it serves that dual purpose of like the note taking and diagramming, but also it's my I have a work machine, so this is my personal machine, and if I need to do personal things during the day, I do them on that iPad. I have what are we up to? 6th generation iPad Mini still here. That hasn't gotten a ton of use lately, but even before I upgraded, I'd kind of settled back on the 11-inch as my smaller iPad, so it's here for something. I'll figure that out.
Yeah, right.
And then I still have my M1 12.9-inch Pro that I kind of plan on using for, like, we'll see what iPadOS 18 looks like, but running more betas on that is kind of where my head is, but we'll see.
Yeah, the M1 12.9, that's the larger one that I still use and have, and I was looking at the trade value. It's like, it's $500 for this terabyte model. That seems low, even though it's not nothing. So that was always a tricky thing. Like, with the M4, I ended up have on back ordered 11-inch Nano-Texture one, and I was like, let me get an 11-inch because that'd be a great replacement for the 10.5-inch, which is 7 years old versus something that's like 3 years old for me.
I'm hoping going forward to, as I upgrade, this is the first year I've bought both, and I plan on upgrading one or the other as they come. So next year 18 months from now, I'd probably upgrade the 11 and keep the 13 where it is, or something like that.
Right. And did you buy both at the same time, or did you get the 13 and realize it's thinner and lighter, but it's still big, and that's why I want the 11 as well?
I bought them both at the same time. Oddly enough, I almost got the Nano-Texture for the 11 because I do more writing on that.
Because it's your mobile
Yeah.
device, right? And you might be outside more with it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then social media, unfortunately, like I saw so much. I don't know. I think ultimately it was that whole like it only goes up to the bezels and like the bezels look different and like I think there was this exaggerated effect that was showing up in pictures that I was kind of like
Yeah,
I don't
from
think
what
I
I've
want to do that.
heard, cameras, your eyes and cameras are very different. To like,
Yeah,
so like even if it may look worse on social media, you might actually enjoy it in person. I personally have not seen it in person, so I just ordered it blind, and like I've heard people that have it love it. So let me see if I love it too, and I'll return it if I don't like it.
and that's kind of like the blooming on the 12.9-inch
Yep.
Pro, where it was like when you take a picture of it or see it in video, it's like, oh my gosh, but like in person, like it's really fine. You
Yeah, it
know?
is. Yeah. And it is. I mean, and the few times I'm working at night on like a perfectly black, thing, text box with like my cursor, it's like I don't know. It just makes me appreciate the pure black of everything else around it even more. I guess. I mean, yeah. So yeah, I'm excited to see what the Nano-Texture is in real life, because that's the smaller one that I intend to use outside more, and
Yeah,
I want to see what kind of how far I can take that with like direct sun usage and stuff. Yeah.
for sure.
So the mini, with the 11-inch, how big is that size difference? Like, is there, yeah,
You
and
know,
the weight difference too? Is it a big
the
weight difference too?
I think honestly it's the weight difference. Like it's not that the I had an M2 11-inch Pro that I did trade in towards the one I have now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's not like it's a huge amount lighter than the previous model, but it's noticeable. And I've tried to use the mini for note taking, which was initially kind of what I was going to purpose that for, and it's fine, but I find like that just the 11-inch size is kind of the sweet spot for so many iPad things you do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is not to say, I don't love my mini. Like
Yeah.
there are two devices in Apple's lineup that if funds allow, I'll probably just always have one of, and it's the iPad mini because I do like it, and then the MacBook Air is another one that I have an M2 sitting here,
Mm-hmm.
and all I've used it for this year is doing my taxes. But like, I I love this. I love fanless computers, so it's like
Yeah.
it's a great machine. So
So, upgrading from the M1 to the M4 13, what's impressed you the most, and what have you enjoyed the most out of using it day to day now?
so the thinness and lightness for sure. Both of those are still noticeable,
Yeah.
even almost a month later. Like it's still kind of the novelty hasn't worn off yet. Just the difference over the 12.9-inch, which you know wasn't heavy, but it was kind of
Dense.
dense. Dense is
Yeah.
a good word. So that's a big thing I notice. From a performance perspective, I guess my videos export a little faster,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. And the screen, right? The OLED display, even the mini LED backlighting was good. It's still a very good screen, but yeah, it doesn't compare to the OLED, so it's nice having that on this machine.
Is the
Um,
brightness noticeable going from 600 to 1,000 nits SDR?
yes,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. Yeah, it's always.
So that seems to be one of the biggest improvements, even beyond the pure blacks, is just brightness. It seems a lot brighter.
Yep, no, 100%. I notice that all the time. And I'm someone who uses auto brightness, so I don't leave
Mm-hmm.
it cranked up all the time. And you definitely notice how much brighter this is, just all the time.
Yeah. And then I tend to opt for cellular if I can put it in the budget and do it. I don't always have it activated. I'm
Yeah.
curious with you getting both sizes and getting cellular on both. Is one active or are they both active? Is like one on a lower end prepaid plan that's just for like Mastodon and one's a bigger one for video that you can watch?
Huh. Yeah. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to figure out in the future. I don't think they'll both have cellular. I'm trying to figure out which one needs it. So
Mm-hmm.
the way I have it set up right now is the 13. I just added it to my Verizon plan, so it's always active.
It's like a
The
$20 per month add-on for them.
I think so, and
Okay.
they just increased the price of the Apple Watch cellular, which kind of annoyed me. So honestly, after the summer, after I'm done running, I'll probably cancel that
Yeah, that's a
because
major bummer. Yeah, T-Mobile's always been the
yeah,
best with that for
yeah,
because they bundle in the taxes with their advertised price. So $10 for Apple Watch actually is $10 instead of like 14 or $15 after taxes.
yeah. It's too. I don't know. Just on principle, it's too much, and
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. So
Yeah, I abuse my Apple Watch Cellular because I'll download a lot of podcasts with Outcasts or Downcasts or Pocket Casts now, and I'll have like some months like use 5 GB of cellular on your. It's like yes, I'm paying for it. Let me.
and then the 11 inch is on a prepaid plan.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What's the best prepaid plan these days?
I just went with, I think it was on 9 to 5 Mac. It's called Tello, I think Tello. I'd
Okay.
have to get up and look, but they advertise just, I think it was, it's $20 for a gig, which probably isn't like a great deal, but it's
Right.
like fine,
And
fine for what I need.
it doesn't expire every month. It can be on there for a bit.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
So it's still new early days, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I've approached that. So we'll see which one ends up staying on cellular going forward.
Right. Yeah. And it's nice just, traveling. You can just add it for that, occasion.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I miss the early days of $30 unlimited AT&T, and that
Yeah.
lasted for maybe 3 months before they canceled that arrangement.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. The things, this is kind of, I guess, a side tangent, but like, it's interesting. Back in the iPod days, right? Apple comes out with the iPod, and then they come out, with the iTunes store, and they've convinced the record labels to like give them this sweet deal because like, oh, it's only for the Mac, and like
Yeah.
it's not going to be a big deal. And then it blows up, and they become like the biggest company in music, and they're fighting the record labels the entire time. For the rest of the time they're doing the
Yeah.
iPod on pricing, and so I feel like that taught like everyone else, every other industry, a lesson about how far you let Apple go. And that's why like in video, I feel like they've never there's always been resistance like when they did the iTunes rentals and stuff like everyone else looked at the music guys and were like, okay, well, we can't let them have free reign. Like we got to keep them, so I feel like it's one of the reasons why they, from a content perspective, at least haven't been able to replicate that iTunes success is because everyone saw them coming and they're not.
Yeah, AT&T must have been like, oh, every $30 plan.
Yeah.
Turns out Netflix really runs great in that thing. People are just like streaming video on this thing constantly.
Yep.
Has the move to eSIM been an issue at all for you? Like in prior years, would you just swap SIMs between your iPads?
I used to do that more with the phones back in the day. And honestly, what stopped that was like when they added the phone call sharing between Mac and iPad. Like I just kind of, because I used to do like iPhone during the week and Android during the weekend or something. But as Apple kind of connected everything more, I lost interest. So it's the ecosystem, I guess. But the eSIM thing on the iPad was really only a pain getting set up on Verizon because that trying to do it on device, I couldn't sign in. It was this whole thing. So I had to like call someone, which, I never want to do. And so that was a pain. But other than that, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah. I wish Apple would introduce a feature. I don't know if the companies would let them do this, but like I've got 2 Apple Watches, an Ultra and my old stainless steel I like to wear for, nighttime and stuff. I'd love if like I put the watch on, I get cellular data on that watch that
Yeah.
is actively in use. Like an iPad, I want like a mode where it's like move my iPad plan over to this iPad, and that would be so nice if they had some kind of like continuity of cell usage based on what you're using. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because I bought a iPhone 13 mini um, last year, and with the intention of trying to use it sometimes, like switching to it. But the Apple Watch was one of those things that like there's so much friction in moving the watch between phones. It's like I just never ended up using it like I wanted to.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. Yeah, because that would be
yeah,
one of the friction points there for sure.
yeah,
And then, are you an Apple Pencil guy? Did you get the Pro? Is that something you use on a regular basis?
yeah. I did get the Pro, only one, um, and I do use it. The Pro is interesting though for me. So it turns out, I guess, when I'm writing, I apparently really grip the pencil. So squeeze is triggering for me constantly.
Oh, wow.
It's like
Okay.
constantly. So I'm getting used to that. And yeah, just like moving it around in my hand is just like triggering things. So um
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
I guess you can use the Apple Pencil Pro in elementary school to teach kids to have a more lighter grip on things. Because I know people that like you, they just grip it so hard. It's like you don't need to grip it that hard.
I don't know why, but yeah, that's definitely that's been a problem. But other than that, the whole generated shadow thing was also interesting because I saw that like the next day and thought I was going crazy. Like, it was like, have I never noticed this before? Like, what is going on? And I saw on social media, like, oh my gosh, they're generating these automatically. But I'm like, has this shadow always been here? Like, have I just never noticed that it does this? Like, that was weird.
Yeah, because they
But
had hover with the M2, but I think
yeah,
the thing they needed was the barrel roll to do hover properly. And it's like, oh, we can finally do this reflection thing, shadow thing.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's an interesting attention to detail, but yeah, still learning how to grip it lighter, I guess.
Yeah,
But
and you
otherwise, I
use
do
the
like it.
iPad at work for note taking, so that's like a primary use with
Yeah.
the pencil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your desk setup. Tell me about kind of like when you're at home. How does
Yeah.
the iPad kind of slot into that? You also mentioned you had a Mac as well, and they kind of can interchange now with Thunderbolt.
Yep. So I have, I guess, a setup and a half. So my main setup, I am using a Thunderbolt dock. It's an OWC Thunderbolt dock. Um, I used to have a Razer.
Mm-hmm.
Razer makes a really nice looking Thunderbolt dock, but I tried to mount it under the desk with Velcro, and it fell too many times.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, that was an expensive
Your
lesson.
dock, is it the one that has like an Ethernet port and a bunch of USB ports?
Yeah.
I think I have the same identical model. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's been working really well.
Isn't it nice having Ethernet on the iPad that way?
Yeah, no, exactly. I have that running right now, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's plugged in over Thunderbolt. So the Thunderbolt dock ends up being kind of the centerpiece. I have um, my keyboard, which is one of those mechanical keyboards, even NuFi
Okay.
keyboard, plugs into that. My monitor's plugged into that. Speakers are plugged into that. I also have like a lightning cable and a USB-C cable because I do a lot of mobile development just to be able to quickly plug in there. And then the webcam is also plugged in. So um, thankfully, with them adding external camera support, then like my iPad can finally take use of everything that's plugged in.
So yeah, you're connected to me over FaceTime through
Yep.
the iPad, and you're actually using webcam. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I
What
am. Yep.
What's the model webcam you? Or
It is. It's a Logitech. It's 1080p. I'd have to look up the model, but it was like
yeah,
$50. It's nothing special, but working from home a lot, I used to for a lot of the pandemic actually, I would because I run my work Mac in clamshell mode, so I'd
hmm
always got a call, got to dig this out,
yeah.
open it up, and so I finally broke down and bought a camera towards the tail end of the
Okay,
pandemic.
yeah, and you'll use it with an external display as well.
Yes.
So the camera will be mounted on like on top of that display.
Hmm.
Yep. Okay.
Yep, it's up there now. I have a 4K LG display. I still want
Yeah.
a studio display, but I also have a gaming PC, and from what I was reading, it would work,
Not
but
great.
exactly,
No
and I don't.
HDMI. No
Right.
great. Yeah.
So, and I debated this for weeks, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. My
But I
desk
do.
setup. Uh, I have a PS5 that's
Yeah.
in vertical mode right next to it, and I've got the Sony Endzone M9 monitor. That's
Yeah.
a
Oh,
great
yeah.
monitor.
Mm.
Works well with the Mac and iPad, but also perfect for PS5. Something the Apple display would not be as nice with.
Yeah, it's
But yeah,
unfortunate.
I need to invest in a webcam though. Just mount it on top of there versus trying to use the iPhone or iPad camera.
I will
Yeah.
say it has been frustrating. You know, I don't take a ton of personal video calls, but
Mm-hmm.
at least in Teams, Microsoft Teams doesn't support external camera
Oh
on
really?
iPad. I
Huh.
think I heard something else didn't, and that's one of those things that like it's an example of something the iPad gets knocked for, and like, oh, iPadOS, sucks, but it's like, but the capability's there. It's,
Yes.
the apps need to update to take advantage of it. So
Yeah, it's frustrating when like there's this feature here
yeah,
that's there, but it just the developers don't do the right hooks to integrate it properly.
and that carries over, I think, even to something like another big complaint I see is like Microsoft Office on iPad isn't as good as Mac, which itself is not as good as Windows.
Yeah, which is
But
interesting
it's
because Office I heard were like first class iPad apps, super powerful. Had it, I thought it was
yeah,
fairly feature parity, but maybe not.
I see that all the time. Oh, they just don't compare, and I don't know if it's because I think they multitask too. I think you can even open multiple documents. Last I knew,
Right.
multiple instances. So but I see that a lot online, and it's like there's not really anything technically stopping Microsoft from making the apps better, except that at this point they probably don't want to.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those iPad OS sucks because it's like, well, that's kind of out of Apple's hands a bit.
Yeah. And will your iPad be in like a desk stand so you can use it as an iPad as a secondary display to your bigger display, or what's kind of the iPad doing when you're working at your desk?
Yeah, so right now I have it in 12 South used to, or they probably still do have just like this really, I don't remember what it's called.
The
I'll have to look it up.
Hoverbar Duo.
No, the cheaper one. It's really just like a literal stand of
Okay,
like,
gotcha. Yep.
yeah, that one. I have that.
So it's at table height versus eye height. Yeah.
Yeah, I was using with my M1. I bought a magnetic stand from a company called Chargen, I
Hmm.
believe, which they upgraded it not long after I bought it to actually
Right.
make it adjustable. Unfortunately, so mine's not adjustable, but it at least was magnetic. I could connect it, and I had it. I usually sit it next to my display, and I'll usually throw like music or podcasts on that display, and then
Yeah.
work off the external.
And do you see yourself replacing it with another magnetic stand, or would you go with 12 South, like a Hoverbar Duo, where you could use your 11-inch or your bigger one in the same stand?
I am leaning towards another magnetic, but one with a little bit more freedom than the one I have.
Yeah.
So, and I'm keeping an eye on the one. There's one out there right now that also charges through the smart connector. Kind of that's
Yeah. That
got my attention.
looks very interesting. But it's interesting too. Like when you're at your desk, you're plugged into Thunderbolt, so that's when you actually don't need that functionality. It's
That's true.
that stand would be perfect if you have like a setup like at a kitchen table kind of thing that has some power. Where you just like in iPad, more like iPad as a desktop computer mode without an external display.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I also have like a secondary setup, I guess, and that's really so next to me there's a dresser, and then I have a 4K monitor, the one I replaced uh, with the one I'm using right now. It still mostly works if
If you hit it enough.
yeah. I literally have the power cable taped to the back of it a certain way so it stays
Right.
So it keeps working. But so my 11-inch lives up there in the Magic Keyboard, and then I just have like a Belkin, adapter, HDMI adapter plugged into that. So it's like my poor man standing desk,
Yeah.
which I'll use sometimes.
This episode is sponsored by Agenda, which recently rolled out version 19. In this quick break, I want to share a little bit about Agenda, their awesome iPad version of the app, and my favorite new smart overview I created using the new powerful search features in Agenda 19. Agenda, if you haven't tried it out, is a great note-taking app that really thoughtfully integrates your calendar and reminders into your notes. It is the app I use to prepare for all of my podcast interviews, and its integration with my calendar has been even more instrumental as I've doubled my workload expanding out and creating both iPad Pros and now Vision Pros. Agenda on the iPad is a first-class citizen and is a great example of what can be done if you use all of Apple's APIs to make a stellar iPad app. The app offers the best multi-windowing system of any iPad app I've seen to date. Whether you work in Split View or Stage Manager, Agenda will offer you the most power and flexibility of any iPad app out there. Agenda's iPad app has also been designed to take advantage of the trackpad, and as a result, works great with the Apple Pencils that support hover, and will snap to different UI elements, and offers full pencil kit integration to add sketches to your notes. This also means if you are lucky enough to be using a new M2 iPad Air or M4 iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil Pro, you will be able to take advantage of the new squeeze gesture to pull up your tool palette as you are drawing an agenda. The app is designed great for touch with intuitive gestures, but also has a robust amount of keyboard shortcuts if you are using your iPad with a keyboard. Agenda includes smart overviews that help surface the notes that you are working on. By default, there are overviews for on the agenda, today, and new to Agenda 19 is a new to-do overview that pulls in all of your notes that include to-dos. The huge thing with Agenda 19, though, is that you can also now add your own smart overviews that can be created by anything you can dream up in the search box. My absolute favorite smart overview I've created so far pulls in a few different data points. The first is a date filter. For this filter, I included today's date and all dates 2 weeks from now. The delightful thing I noticed is you can either do those exact dates, or you can instead select to have an updating filter that includes the next 2 weeks. From there, I additionally filtered down to a few different projects I wanted to focus on and filtered it down to notes that were on the agenda. I then hit Create Overview and renamed it in my sidebar to Next 2 Weeks. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time now. I often in the past would overlook something coming up because I didn't have this control over seeing the exact notes I needed to be working on for upcoming interviews and episodes. With Agenda 19, you can use tons of different search criteria and filters to create the exact smart overview that will surface just the notes you need. I can imagine at my old day job using people tags to create smart overviews to pull in certain groups of people and being more prepared for meetings, being able to have a bunch of different overviews that pull notes from all of my projects into one place with the right people. It is such a flexible system that provides a ton of power. Agenda really is the note-taking app that helps keep me on track with all my personal and work tasks. If you've ever tried using a task manager to take notes and were frustrated by that experience, give Agenda a try. If you haven't tried Agenda, I'd really encourage you to give it a shot. Agenda is free to download and use with no obtrusive ads. To unlock the full power of Agenda, give Agenda Premium a try. One thing that Agenda continues to do that I love is their approach to premium features and unlocks. If you ever decide to cancel your Agenda Premium subscription, you get to keep all the Agenda Premium features available when you were a subscriber, or you can opt for their lifetime unlock, which will unlock the full power of Agenda on all of your Apple devices with a single one-time purchase. To learn more, go to agenda.com. Download Agenda 19 today for free from the App Store. My thanks again to Agenda for sponsoring this episode of iPad Pros. Learn more at www.agenda.com.
So, let's actually get into the apps and things you're doing with the iPad. Some, 35 minutes into the show or whatever. I know we can go off on different things. I'm just very intrigued by hardware and setups. Like, it's something I'm just fascinated by.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Yeah, but let's get into, I'd say video editing is number one, and
Mm-hmm.
Final Cut Pro is your current main app, and, why that over, LumaFusion, DaVinci Resolve's out there. What do you like about Final Cut?
So I think I went with Final Cut because, of years and years of watching iPad reviews, iPad Pro reviews,
Yes.
generally ending with, well, it won't be Pro until Final Cut's on,
Yeah,
till they
yeah.
bring Final Cut. So I think that heavily influenced my decision to go with Final Cut. So once it came out and I decided I wanted to start making videos, it was just the natural choice for me. With much respect to LumaFusion, who has been holding it down all these years before, and supports a wider array of iPads, right? Because
Yeah.
Final Cut only works on the M series. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's mainly why I went that direction. And for me, I started my channel in November of last year, November 2023, or I guess December is when I uploaded my first video. But
Mm-hmm.
I've never done this before. I don't know anything. I didn't know anything about video editing, so I'm starting from the ground floor, um, and so that Final Cut has been. I've seen some complaints. It's not pro enough. It's been pro enough for me.
And that's
for
a
where
great
I
place to
am.
be learning because, like, you get into version 1, and as they add new features, you can learn those
Mm-hmm.
and grow with the app versus going into an app with, a 20-year history and, like, it's more confusing in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been really, really good for that. I mean, I have my feature requests too, but like, yeah, for my purposes, Final Cut has been more than enough to get my channel off the ground.
What's the style of your videos? Like, what kind of stuff are you creating right now?
So I do a mix of the whole thrust of what I want to do is I want to kind of like yourself encourage iPad productivity, right? There's been this narrative, especially over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, of like you can't be productive on an iPad, you can't get work done on an iPad. I mean, it's always been there, but since I don't know, since Apple Silicon came to the Mac, it's just kind of has been so much more. So I do a combination of like tutorial type. Here's how you use this app. Like here's how you use files to get the most out of files. I'm working on a video right now about uh, backing up your iPad, the different ways you can do that.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that content. I do, dabble in like the current events, like and reviews as well. Um, but it's all kind of been iPad focused. With the thrust of what I want to do though
Mm-hmm.
is more, I guess, educational and just showing people the ways you can get things done, and then you make your decision as if this tool is right for you. But it just seems like the narrative right now is that this isn't the right tool for anyone, and that's completely false.
Right. So do those videos. You'll be doing screen captures on the iPad itself. Will you have an overhead camera for some stuff, or like what kind of like stuff do
Yeah,
you need to capture to make these videos?
I do a fair amount of screen capture. I do have an overhead stand or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So my camera is at this point just my phone. I have a
Yep.
iPhone 15 Pro, so I'm using that. So I do that. I have mostly, I guess I do handheld. Um, and then I have one of those like selfie stick things
Yeah.
for some shots. So I do a combination of like I do a combination of the screenshots, the screen capture stuff, and pictures of my video of myself, or sometimes I do the talking head thing, um, and I have various stands for that.
Nice. Okay. And as far as iPad features within Final Cut Pro, are you utilizing any of those things? Like, are you annotating on the video with the pencil, or
Yeah, I
yeah.
actually do. I think on pretty much every video I've done so far, I've done some kind of pencil annotation. So, um, I use that a lot, and that's really a really nice and handy feature for me.
Yeah. And as far as things you'd like to see in Final Cut for iPad, for me, I just want external display support. Like, I don't want it to be a 4:3 window at all times.
Yeah.
What are the quirks of the app for you so far?
Well, building off of that, you know, to enable that, I think the app would need to support multitask, or not even multitasking, but just like split view and slide over, which surprisingly Logic does.
Logic
And
does do that. Okay.
yeah, I tested that, confirmed that yesterday that you can actually put Logic in a slide over window. It's kind of weird actually, but
Interesting.
Logic then, because it supports those technologies, Logic does play better on the external monitor. Um,
Because so with Logic you can resize it and it's more
Yeah.
flexible. That's great to hear
Mhm.
because I've not messed around with Logic as much. Yeah, and with Final Cut, it'd be so nice to have like the iPad screen be like a viewfinder for the video, and then on your external you have your timeline and stuff.
I am kind of low key hoping that Final Cut 2, they slip that in there.
Because we're still waiting on Final Cut 2 that has not launched yet, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not
Okay.
launched yet.
As the time of recording, this will be released after WWDC, so who knows what time this comes out.
And I guess the other thing would be, and this could just be my ignorance, but I don't see a way to do chapters in my videos. I think the desktop Final Cut, which I've never used, supports chapters or putting chapters in. I don't see a way to do it in the iPad version, so that would be useful for me in what I do.
Yeah, with chapters, is there like standard formats for that? I know like podcasts, MP3s have a format. I wasn't sure if like you can upload a video and YouTube already recognizes here's the chapters.
It when you upload the video, it says it'll automatically create chapters for you,
Right.
which I don't trust particularly.
No, I wouldn't either.
I mean, it's maybe better than nothing. I mean, when I give myself more time, I will go and I'll go pin a comment with timestamps.
Yeah.
But I would love proper whatever that looks like. Proper chapter support would be great.
And what's your input method as you're editing on the iPad? Like it is a touch optimized app, but are you using the trackpad and keyboard or?
Every now and again, I will use the keyboard and trackpad, but I 95% of the time just use touch. When they announced these apps, right? They didn't.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing wasn't even around like the Magic Keyboard. Like they were showing people using it. I think in the demo areas they had set up at some event, it was literally the iPads using screen mirroring connected to monitors. Like it wasn't. They weren't. They were very clear that like they rebuilt these apps for touch, and I find Final Cut especially just works better when I'm working with my hands. Even recently, I've just started like pacing while I'm editing because I can do that. Which is kind of weird, but it's working for me. So I'm almost exclusively just using my hands, and I find that it works better that way.
So what's that look like? Like to play and pause? Are you able to 2-finger tap anywhere on the screen to do that? Like what are the different gestures and like what's that look like from a flow perspective?
I mean, for me, it's really just a lot of like I'm not even really taking advantage of like advanced gestures. It's mostly hit the play, see something you want to edit, go in there and cut it out or tweak this or add this effect. I guess dragging and dropping effects from the timeline and then adjusting them in the inspector, like different blur effects or whatever. And then just moving the head back and running it again and just kind of doing that over and over again.
Will you be working with multiple video streams? Like one's the iPad screen recording, one's you as a talking head, or like what's it look like from a timeline perspective? How crazy does it end up looking?
It's not impossible. When I set goals for myself and my channel. And when I hit my next milestone, I have kind of committed to buying a quote unquote real camera. So I will have potentially a couple of cameras. It won't be using the multicam from Final Cut 2. Although again, I do have that iPhone Mini, so I guess I could.
Right, but you're not going to buy up like 4 new iPhones.
No, I'm not doing that.
That wouldn't be a great use of funds. I would not.
No, as a beginner.
You could type it. Use your different iPads as multicams and stuff. Lower quality video for sure.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose. I would need to figure out multicam first, right? Again, as a beginner, like I would need to do some research on how to actually utilize that properly in a video. So
yeah, the biggest thing I could think for you would be you'd have one camera that's facing you, so you can look at it and speak to it. You have another overhead camera, so you can look at your iPad in your hands. Like that would be 2 cameras I think would be of interesting use, right?
That's a good point.
And then And then if one camera is hooked up to a really good mic, you have your audio source through that or something.
Yeah, that's something I got to think about and I got to figure out.
But I know a
We'll
lot of
see.
people don't bother with multicam and just like do the shots and they edit together and they don't bother with that approach. So
I have a lot of ambitions for this channel, so I could see myself getting there one day. Um, so we'll see.
yeah. Yeah, I know the Meta like Ray-Bans can shoot video. I wonder if anyone like has clear lenses of those that is using that as like a multicam input. Because you can use audio to sync in the current multicam, so you could like record video with what you're actually seeing, and I don't know, that could be interesting. Probably not great.
The technology is interesting, regardless.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I did more video. It's just so time consuming. The audio
Yeah.
is easier for me to clean up and make good.
Yeah, you're not wrong, man. It is, especially if it's not your full-time job, like it, working a full day and then trying to make videos on top of that, like it's a lot of time, it's a lot of work, but
Yeah,
it's
that's
what you get
but
into.
rewarding, I'd imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So, tell me about the Affinity apps. Oh,
Yes.
before we move to that,
Yeah.
Final Cut Pro. I love this thing on it stops the video export when you leave the app. It's like we've had Stage Manager now. I don't know what these people are doing with like put in Stage Manager, use your other apps in that stage.
Yeah.
And I understand it shouldn't when you leave it the stage just quit. That's stupid, but
Yeah.
yeah, most time I'm capable enough to stay in my stage without jumping around. As that has not been an issue for you, I'd imagine.
No, because 9 times out of 10, I'm like up late finishing a video. And then when I get to the export stage, it's like, okay, I'm going to go take a break or get some water or
Yes.
something, right? So
Yeah.
that hasn't been a problem. I will say on that note, on the background kind of download note, I feel like the main problem there, people point out, right? These things have M series chips in them. They should be able to do backgrounding. I think the issue is more an experience thing. I think because there's nothing like Activity Monitor or something where if a user feels their iPad's bogged down because something's running in the background, there's no place where they can go and see that and manage it in the same way. So I feel like if they were going to expand background downloads, they would want to do that in an iPad-y way. I think that's really the hold up there.
Yeah. Yeah, on Vision Pro with LumaFusion, I can just throw my window to the ceiling and carry about my day as it exports. It's nice.
Do you know if Final Cut, the iPad version, runs on Vision Pro?
It does not, sadly. I've even tried side loading it, and it fails to launch even in that situation.
Because I remember that was a Mark Gurman rumor before the Vision Pro launched that Apple would be probably leveraging the iPad versions on Vision Pro of Final Cut and Logic.
I hope they get there one day because that would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
To see that. Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
So, Affinity apps. What are you using here? And kind of, I know Publisher isn't a part of your current workflows, but
Correct.
Yeah, tell me about that.
I use Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer, I think it's called. The photo, as you might imagine, I use for some what I'd consider relatively light photo editing.
Mm-hmm.
Both of these mostly support thumbnails, but they also support images for the website as well. So any kind of touch-ups I need to do generally happen in Affinity Photo, and then the actual thumbnail creation, putting everything together, adding text, and all that happens in Designer. I went with those apps because I did a little bit of research, and it looked like they, Serif, the company behind Affinity, they were putting actual effort and time into the iPad. Like it wasn't like a second-class citizen compared to their desktop apps. So that's kind of why I went there, and the no subscription thing, which could change, but
yeah, they have new ownership for those that haven't heard. But they've done updates, and they've said they're going to continue this approach. And
I used to be a Pixelmator user.
Yeah,
and that was a great tool, but I don't know, something about, I mean, obviously, any developer can do what they
Pixelmator
want.
is definitely more simple. Like the
Yeah,
UI of Affinity apps, it scares me. Like I really,
it's hard. Yeah.
it's. I've tried to use them. I own them all. Like, but I often for just my thumbnails just let me open up Pixelmator Classic and do this very basic thing. Like I'm doing not
Yeah.
rocket science here.
No, that's actually been a decent sized learning curve for me too, because those are complex interfaces for a novice. Um, but I guess I switched from Pixelmator just because I can't figure out why Pixelmator Pro isn't on the iPad. Like, I know we have
Yeah.
Photomator,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels like they I know it's like it's a couple guys, and I think they probably hire out to do some stuff, but it seems like they just were taking the iPad seriously and then they stopped, which is like fine, it's their choice, but like I try to support companies that are putting in the effort on iPad, so that's why I went with Affinity.
Yeah, and Photomator is amazing. That's my favorite photo editing app out there, and they continue to add stuff to it. So I do
Sure.
hope we get Pixelmator Pro one of these days because
Yeah.
I've heard such good things, and I've tempted now that I have a headless MacBook Air to try that one out. So
Yeah.
it's a budgeting thing with all these Mac apps. They are expensive, yeah.
Hmm.
So it adds up. And do you end up using the shared file structure between the Affinity apps? Like, will you go between Photo and Designer with the same file?
It's on my to-do list. I actually haven't been taking advantage of that.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I've generally just been doing the bootleg method of editing my photo, throwing it in, exporting it to Photos, and then pulling that into Designer. So, um, and that's another one of those things. Like, I think it wasn't completely immediately obvious to me, so I didn't follow up on how to do that. But
Okay.
yeah.
And yeah, the UI of it, Apple Pencil to get around those tiny touch targets, or
It's really not that bad.
okay,
They are small, but I maybe 50% of the time I'm using the pencil.
yeah, yeah. That's one of those apps where it's like, oh, I can go in my iPad system preferences to change how big
Yeah,
things are, and it's like that's an app that actually benefits from messing around with that a little bit.
yeah, and it's a good example of, again, I feel like I'm airing grievances
Yeah,
here, but
desktop
like
class apps. This is a desktop
right,
class app. Yeah, for sure.
but you even talked about like how small things can get, and it's like when people are saying like with Final Cut, well, why don't they just basically copy paste the Mac app? Well, I mean, you really do need those bigger touch targets, even
Yeah.
on a 13-inch iPad. Like, you can't just, that's not a good way to do things.
No, it's not. Yeah. Um, Ulysses is your writing app of choice.
Yeah.
And this is one app category. There are so many options for writing on iPad. Like, it's a great computer for writing.
Yeah.
I used to use Ulysses, then it became overkill for my needs.
Hmm.
What makes Ulysses great for you, and why do you love it? Yeah.
Yeah. When I started this, like, there were so many options. Like you said, like, it was overwhelming. Like, I couldn't figure out what the best one was. And I think Ulysses is one I've just heard about probably on something like Mac Stories and like 9 to 5 Mac. Like, it's been mentioned. And I looked at it, and the interface looked clean. Um, Seemed like pretty good iPad app, so I decided to dive into that at least for a year, um, to see how I get on with it, and I've been enjoying it so far. Um, you could argue, like, do you really need? You could just use Notes or something. Well, sure, but like, it's
Yeah.
a purpose-built app like Ulysses. Um, I don't know. I feel like it's helped me be more productive and stay more focused because like only gets used for writing a blog post or a video script or something, and just having that separation just of a different app from Notes has been nice too.
And do you end up using any of the? You have a blog as well. Do you end up using
Yeah.
the like direct publishing from Ulysses, or is it more of a copy paste approach?
I'll write, I guess, what I would call the first couple drafts or whatever in Ulysses, and then I will do the direct publish to WordPress.
Mm-hmm.
And then in WordPress, it used to be in the Jetpack app I would do this, but I've kind of migrated to just doing this in the browser.
Okay.
But that's where I start adding images, and doing like a final grammar review. Although I'm sure I still miss things, and yeah, just layout and stuff all gets done in the browser before final publish.
Have you ever messed around with doing images within Ulysses? Because I think it can do that. I'm not sure how well it does.
Uh, you know, I know it. The link I usually put my links in Ulysses, and that carries over pretty well. So it wouldn't surprise me that it could. I will sometimes, when you upload, it asks you for your featured image, and I will
Mm-hmm.
sometimes drop that in there. But I should give that a go. I should actually give that a shot and just see how well it works.
Yeah. What's your actual process for creating a new video, like from brainstorming to kind of executing on it?
So I have a list and reminders, a couple lists actually, of ideas for both for the blog, for the site, and for videos. And so, I'm not as my process could use some refinement for sure,
Yeah.
and some focus, but basically, yeah, I'm looking at, every week I look at, okay, what are my ideas, or if something is going to, if there's something topical I can make a video about, that would might slot in over whatever kind of was scheduled next. But basically kind of pull an idea off the reminders list, and then I start outlining in Ulysses. um, and then once I'm good with that, then I start trying to think through the different shots I want to grab and start recording, I guess, the B-roll and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, if it's depending on, there's a couple different ways I shoot my videos, but um, then I would record like the voiceover or the talking head part, um, and then start putting everything together. So, um, you know, I, I want to say it takes like a week, but honestly, this ends up being mostly a weekend thing. So
Okay.
I clear a lot of my weekends to work on videos. Something I should be better about spreading out throughout the week, but that's just kind of how things end up.
Sure. Yeah. And for your video scripts,
Yeah.
is it a word for word, or is it more like an outline structure of just here's kind of the points I want to hit?
It is more of an outline.
Mm-hmm.
When there's something more technical in nature, like the one I'm working on now, that's probably going to be a bit more word for word, and it'll probably have a corresponding, like, go to this post on the site to
Mm-hmm.
kind of, if you want to follow along there, type of thing. So that one might be a
Yeah.
little more word for word, but I generally, I try not to. I don't want to be robotic. I
Yes.
want to have a little bit more flow, um because I'm a low key guy, right? And that's probably, honestly, to my detriment in YouTube, because YouTube kind of prioritizes, the hot takes and
Oh yeah.
the gaping faces and all that. That's not me, and
Right.
and I'm not gonna try to pretend that it is. Um, so I try to keep, I want to keep some life, I guess, in the video.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. And then as far as WordPress, you mentioned the Jetpack app, but
Hmm.
you're probably like me and have realized that's not a great app. Safari also it's good, but yeah. What have been your frustrations with WordPress on the iPad? Because it's gotten better over the years, but still not amazing.
I feel like the Jetpack app at this point is really just, I like the widget and looking at statistics. Um, but even that is kind of janky sometimes in how it updates. So yeah, initially I was doing everything in Jetpack, but um, yeah, I have pulled back to the website a bit more, and the website is fine. Um, it it's interesting because there's some jank in the website, but it's like I can't put my finger on
Yeah,
what's not
everything
right.
mostly works as
But
you'd want it
yeah,
to.
but something just doesn't feel, maybe it's just not as responsive as you would expect. I don't know, but there's,
Like sometimes if I hit Command B, bold doesn't happen. I need to like go out and hit the bold button in the UI kind of thing.
and I guess we can assume those are, iPad Safari issues maybe. Which, there's work to be done there. But the website has been I've been having a better time since moving more towards the website for
Yeah.
the WordPress stuff.
Yeah. And then you mentioned reminders. Is that kind of your go-to task management system? Do you do much
Hmm.
with task management in general?
So, I tried to use Trello at times, um, and that's fine, but something about it just doesn't click for me. And then at work, I actually use Microsoft To Do for managing to-dos. I'm a basic. I know like a lot of people, at least on YouTube, are on like Notion and stuff like that. I'm pretty basic in that regards. Like I just need a list of things and I need due dates. Um, that's really about it. So I am still using reminders until the point that, it becomes cumbersome or it no longer serves my needs. Then I'll explore something else. But, I'm one of those people who always tries to start with the built-in stuff and then you move out and, if that's not working for you.
Yeah, and reminders is getting better and better over the years. Like it has this like Kanban type board thing if you want to even do that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it's yeah, the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of updates. Because I think reminders, if I'm not wrong, used to be, I'm trying to remember because the way that notes used to be like specially formatted mail messages, like they
Right.
weren't.
Yeah.
I feel like reminders was like tied up in the calendaring system somehow. Like it wasn't like a
It's
full.
something like that. It's very basic too. It's just like here's a single list or whatever or something.
Yeah, and then they redid the app like a few years ago, and now it's its own thing. So it's gotten a lot better since then. The syncing used to be terrible, um, and it's not like 100% today, but it's way better than it used to be.
Right. Yeah. And the watch app is fairly decent too, which is nice.
I don't get why it's so slow on the watch. Like I'm on a Series 7,
Yeah.
so maybe that's my problem. But I feel like even on back in the day on my Series 4, it just feels slower than it should be on the watch. I don't get
Yeah.
that.
Hmm. Yeah. Um. Then one of the more basic apps, because it's brand new, Freeform.
Yes.
I have not found a place for this in my life. It's a cool app.
Yeah.
The Vision OS collaboration stuff is super well done. Being able to both have multiple people work on the shared board at the same time, really
Hmm.
nice. How are you utilizing this kind of endless canvas app?
So I'm familiar with the concept because at work we've used a tool called Miro, which is a similar type of endless canvas type of app.
Yeah,
So I was familiar with the concept. So I've been using it for, I don't do a ton of coding outside of work, but I'm trying to get back into that. So a lot of project plans for that stuff, for the apps I want to build, like the one I'm starting to build now, starts in Freeform. And I just start drawing out ideas both for interfaces and just how I think the app architecture is going to be. Um, but I also use it personally. Like, my vision board is in Freeform, of where I want to be, 5, 10, 15 years. That stuff goes in here too. Um, so that's mainly, I guess, for the side development side of things. That's kind of where I've integrated Freeform mostly.
okay. And then, as we talked about, you're a developer, and
Yes.
Swift Playgrounds is Apple's iPad solution for now. What kind of projects are you able to tackle on iPad, and when do you feel you need to graduate up to Xcode to do what you're trying to do?
So the easy answer would be that Swift Playground supports basic apps, and that is true because there are things that it doesn't support
Like
unless things have changed
subscriptions,
recently.
even, right?
Subscriptions, widget kit, I can't do widgets, and widgets are still, I think, relatively popular in iOS
Yeah.
and iPadOS, so
And
can't do
subscriptions is what
widgets.
Apple encourages every developer to do for their monetization model, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, you can do more than you might think just looking at it because you open the app and you see these kind of kid level tutorials and you're
Yeah,
like,
video
oh,
game almost.
yeah, exactly. But like, there's an app template where basically you can just go crazy, like just use it as a fancy text editor. So I've built some very small personal apps in Playgrounds. I was working. in my sea of abandoned projects, I got pretty far in a music player app in Swift Playgrounds, which I'll probably come. The wall I hit is I'm not a designer, so like I'll get the back end working, and then I start making interfaces, and then they look terrible, and I lose motivation. Like it's like I don't want to do this anymore. So where I need to graduate to Xcode, like you said, we talked about, like if I want to do something with widgets, for example, or um, I want to, Playgrounds only supports iPadOS and iOS. If I want to do something with the watch, if I want to, I hope to one day do something on Vision Pro.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can't do those things in Playgrounds, but yeah, I do want to get the point across that again, try out that app template. Like Playgrounds is basic as a development tool, but you can do more than you might think. And actually, one more thing on the augmented reality front. So I was doing some prototyping in Playgrounds, and it turns out, in the Playgrounds interface, you have your code on one side and you have your preview. You have a live preview, like an Xcode. Well, it turns out that because the iPad has an outward facing camera, you can have a live preview of like your AR interactions as you're coding, which you
Oh,
can't you can't really do on a laptop. And I kind of stumbled on that. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool, as I'm kind of trying some different ideas. So that's actually an advantage on the iPad side.
no, it's pretty neat. Because on the Mac, you'd get a front-facing camera. I don't even know if Xcode
Hmm.
would let you do a live. Probably not, right?
No, not no. You would think they would use that because you can't even do anything camera related in Xcode, to my, like, so you have to, test that stuff on device.
Yeah, and then you're utilizing working copy as a
Yeah.
way to sync stuff across. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, you can sync over, iCloud Drive or something, but my workflow has been to create a Git repo for version control. Then create a Git repo using working copy, and that connects to my GitHub account. Um, and then I can create my Playgrounds project either in Xcode on the Mac or on the iPad, and just kind of connect, put that in that repo, and then sync that between the two platforms. It's a little tricky on the Mac because you have to you can't use like the built-in Git support in Xcode if you do it that way.
Oh, okay.
Like you have to go a folder level up to do interact with Git in the project, but that project type doesn't play well. Like if you do it that way and you sync it to your iPad, the iPad can't open it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird kind of structure,
Because
but
Xcode can do things Swift playgrounds can't. So if you do something
mhm.
in Xcode, it might break.
Yeah, you got to be a little bit careful there, but if you kind of stay on the stay on the beaten path, I
Yeah.
guess, you'll be fine. So that's an area I'm trying to do a bit more of, is just, yeah, the kind of, because I do have this Mac Mini here, because I found over the years, I used to do the whole, I'd have a MacBook, and I do this for work, but I'd
Mm-hmm.
have my personal Mac, and I realized all I ever did was plug it up to a monitor and close it. Like I never
Right.
used the
Yeah.
display, and then I'm worrying now. The battery's a concern because it's plugged in all the time.
Sure.
So just realized one day, like, well, the best desktop is probably going to be an actual desktop that I don't have to worry about. So the combination of a Mac Mini on the desk and then the iPad for portable has been pretty cool for me.
Nice. Yeah. And then, yeah, and utilizing that webcam on the monitor doesn't really matter if, with it being closed or not having one with the Mac Mini. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then, as Swift Playgrounds improves, do you think we'll ever get Xcode for iPad, or will Swift Playgrounds just morph into something powerful enough to be that?
You know, the fact that they went to the trouble of doing Final Cut and Logic suggests to me that Xcode will come one day.
Right,
Um,
because like GarageBand doesn't replace Logic; those
yeah.
both exist, and there are Swift Playgrounds for the Mac even.
Hmm. So what I don't know is what that looks like. I think it's going to be another one of those things. I mean, Apple's shown a pattern here, right? Like they're not going to copy paste the Mac Xcode. It's going to be something different. It probably won't support like building Mac apps, I would imagine.
Right.
Um, or maybe even I feel like it won't have full Apple platform support. But from a debugging and development perspective, I think there's going to be more than what Playgrounds has. And I've kind of it's been long enough that I've kind of stopped hoping every WWDC is going to show up. But like all this talk about AI powered Xcode, just I don't know, kind of feels like it'd be a really good time to introduce, if not Xcode, maybe it's something different. Maybe like a new AI powered development environment, and hey, it's on Mac and iPad. But like it seems like a good time to like announce something else for development on iPad.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're recording this the week before WWDC, so we'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed.
And then your other two core apps that I think is foundational for most people's work is just Files and Notes.
Mm-hmm.
And Notes has gotten crazy powerful the years. Files continues to slowly improve, but still not amazing.
Yeah.
Anything out of the ordinary you want to mention on these two apps?
Um, the files thing is interesting. And anytime, well, I guess it depends on how much time I have, but people complain a lot about files. And I guess because they want it to be Finder, which is funny because if you've been in the Mac side of things for a while, people used to complain about the Finder all the time about how bad it was compared to I don't know what, but something. Like it was just like, so it's kind of funny to me that it's what people are aspiring to. But I don't the last feature I really needed for files was just when they opened up the on my iPad section to let you store, like, because I could basically just take all my documents and stuff from my Mac and put it there on my iPad. And like, I'm good. Like, drag and drop folder creation, like, my files needs are, I guess, pretty minimal. So I don't have the problems other people seem to have with, like, why don't what gripes do you have with the Files app?
Um, the big thing I'd say is um, it's kind of like things appear and disappear randomly at times when I'm like trying to do something. Especially, I love the ability of having locations of like I've got Synology Drive as the location. The
Yeah.
Mac Finder does not have that. There's like I love that apps can have their own locations and be in the Files app, and that's and when that works, it's awesome. But occasionally, it just like I'm not going to sync this properly. I'm not going to.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing that can be frustrating. But overall, it's great when you have external hard drives hooked in. Um, you know, it does what I need it to do most of the time. It's buggy.
Okay.
We still don't have the pinned files that they announced 4 years ago, or whatever that was.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does what needs to.
I have this theory. A lot of the problem, because for apps, exposing your files to the Files app is opt-in. It doesn't happen by default. By default, your data's sandboxed, right? And I
Yeah.
think if more apps expose their files and let you interact with them that way, I think a lot of the complaints about the bad file system would go away. But because it's optional,
Right.
uh, you get this kind of, because I think some of the emulators I think I've read, like I'm not into that scene, but like let you just drop ROMs into a folder and then in the Files app and they just work. So
Yeah. Yeah, having a default file type for that'd be nice to be able to set that. Always open this file in X
yeah.
app. That would be really really nice for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The final notes that you sent over to me were about Logic Pro, which you mentioned earlier
Yeah.
that you have some experience with it, does the split screen and all that, and you use it with the Scarlett Solo interface.
Mm-hmm.
So what's kind of your use of Logic? Is it audio for the videos through voiceover work, or are you doing any music stuff?
So it is mostly kind of voiceover audio, although Final Cut does have tools for that. I just there are some templates in Logic that I like, and I feel like it makes my voice sound better than what's in Final Cut. So it's an extra step because my setup isn't as fancy to like. Honestly, I'll have like my phone recording me, and then I've got like a microphone attached to me, plugged into an iPad, running Logic to record my audio directly. Um, it's like there's a better way to do this, I'm sure. But so basically I'll record my voiceovers in Logic using the kind of template I want. I may tweak some things a bit and remove some noise, and then export them to files, and then pull them into Final Cut. I do a little bit of music stuff. I will.
Yeah.
It's not as much as I wish, but I will occasionally, be asked to add some like background vocals to something, and so, I will do that in Logic pretty quick. I have a couple mics here I can use, and yeah, just with the Scarlett Solo, um, it gets the job done for the level I'm working at. I also, I guess this isn't really related, but I was teaching myself to play drums. I have an electric drum set here,
Yeah.
and I was using iPad for that as well. Just as the app I was using was on iPad, so it's another musical use, I guess.
Right. With the voiceover work, is there any tools within Logic for iPad to do like background removal at all? I know there's that split stream thing.
Yeah, the stem splitter thing.
Stem
Yeah.
splitter, and that would be an interesting just to like test it. If I record outside with a bunch of loud noise, I use stem splitter to get my vocal isolated in that way, maybe.
There are some noise reduction tools, but I really, I forget about that stem splitter thing. I want to try that just as someone who wants to do more music like on my own. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, so I can't.
I'm tempted to use stem splitter and throw Love Supreme in there and just see if I can isolate John Coltrane and do some fun stuff with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet, but it is on my list of things to do. But there are some noise removal tools in both Logic and Final Cut that the Final Cut one I feel like makes me sound robotic more than I'd like, but just kind of applying it at the right levels to try to fix that.
Yeah, the iPad app I love for just noise removal has been Bruce Free.
Okay.
BRUSFRI. I think it's like $20 or something, maybe a little bit less. It also works as an audio plugin, but I find it works best as just a standalone app to just process your audio, then work with it. And you just like hit a button, and it samples the audio you want it to use as like, here's my voice. And then it'll go through the file, and like if there's like air conditioning, it'll get rid of that stuff, and it does a really great job. Like it's an impressive app for that.
I want to check that out.
Yeah, I don't use it all the time, but when I have a bad audio track I need to like save, that's one way I try to work with audio.
You're using Ferrite, right, for editing?
Yes, for editing. Yep, and that's an amazing tool. Like that it doesn't exist on the Mac. Like I think the best way to edit and publish a podcast, it's on iPad or on Vision Pro because I've sideloaded it there. Yeah, but
yeah. I want to do a podcast. Again, time and focus, but like partially just to use Ferrite. But it's the thing I want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and that I'm curious if that might be an interesting tool to use instead of Logic. Save the $5 a month or whatever it is. And
that's a good
do
point.
voiceover work in there maybe.
Interesting.
Potentially, yeah. Then I'm curious with the M4 big and small. There's no home screen syncing yet, sadly, like Apple TV has. How do you actually manage using both as like regular active iPads?
So it kind of comes down to what I'm using them for. So if you looked at the home screen of like the 13-inch, that does have, and I guess I have a ton of apps in the dock here too, but that's where the more worky apps are. The 11-inch gets used for some work for sure, but it is, in my mind, that's where I would, like, if I want to try out some game or something, like, or Diablo Immortal, I play a tiny bit of that. That's on the 11-inch. The 11-inch is a little more, I hate to say, like, constant consumption, because it's thrown around a lot. But it does get used for that. There's a lot more of that on the smaller one, because, I love my 13, but, like, the 11-inch size just feels right in so many ways. So, but that home screen, is a bit more sparse, and there's games and stuff over there. So That's kind of how I've segmented the work there. Um, like I pick up the 13 when I want to work on a video or I want to work on something for the site, but the 11 inch, like I might just be, okay, I want to have this out while I'm watching TV. That's kind of
I
where that
see.
goes.
Yeah. And you got Magic keyboards for both, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't going to, and then I did. But I thought for sure the 11 inch, because I use it more for note taking from a work perspective, I thought I wouldn't, but I just went ahead and yeah, I bought that one in black and then the bigger one in silver. It looks nice. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is wild. Just I think of the keyboard costs. They're great keyboards, but man,
They are
man,
painful.
it is painful though, because like yeah, you look at the costs, like you almost bought a MacBook Air with just keyboards.
I and it's not lost on me. I keep saying, I want a Vision Pro, and I spent Vision Pro money on these things. Like
Yeah, between two
every
iPads, that is Vision Pro
and
money. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's Vision. So it's just I had budgeted for these, and I didn't really. Yeah, I budgeted for these from like the day the M2s came out. Like, I'm
Okay,
like,
yeah.
okay, I'm good. So I started, saving for that, and I didn't really budget for another what would be $4,000 expense because I
Yes,
would get Apple Care on my Vision Pro.
absolutely.
you know?
Yes.
So, oh,
No. Yeah,
side,
it's all about budgeting. Like, yeah, I budgeted for the
yeah,
Vision Pro, and the iPad
yeah.
became the secondary device if I was good. Yeah, and I'm gonna find a way. Yeah, I have one ordered, and I found a way to cover it. So, yeah.
I have to sell a bunch of. I don't even know if I have enough stuff to sell, so I just get a Vision Pro. But I do want one. Um, I hope to get one this year, but we'll see.
Yeah. No, I love mine, but it is definitely not for everybody. But I think it's for people that, yeah, if you know you want, if you know it's for you, yeah, I think you'll.
Well, it essentially runs iPadOS. Like it's a derived.
Yeah, it runs iPad apps for sure.
My my understanding it was Vision OS is
Based on that.
based.
Yeah.
So obviously it does more. It does things differently, but it is closer to an iPad than a Mac.
Absolutely. And at this, it's a weird thing. Cause like at the same time, it integrates so much nicer with the Mac with the digital virtual display and the keyboard and trackpad. But it runs iPad apps as the fallback as well. So it's like it plays well with iPad because it runs all your iPad apps, but also plays well with Mac because like you can just throw it in there, which is yeah.
They get so much mileage out of that Mac screen display feature. Like I know Vision Pro is new, but I look at that, that the whole thing about the iPad is it should run Mac OS and it needs Mac OS,
and Sidecar, like that feature is in iPad through Sidecar, basically. Yeah.
I find it interesting that the same narrative isn't there for Vision OS, that it should be, running Mac OS. And I think it's just because, well, I can run my Mac here and it's a really big display. Like it just kind of heads that, even though the productivity story arguably isn't as strong on Vision OS alone as it is on iPad, but because you have that feature, it feels like it's like, well, we don't care about, the whole Mac OS thing as much.
Right.
It's just weird.
Yeah. It's a bit odd. Yep. Well, anything we haven't covered before we wrap it up?
I guess from an iPad perspective, like we went over, the hardware and the apps I use, and I guess what I want to say, kind of a statement, is like, I started doing all of this, creating content, I guess, in December of last year, after years of just kind of wanting to, and never doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of why I wanted to do that was because, like I said, the narrative on iPad just the past few years, like I used to watch a lot of YouTube, which I don't really have time to anymore, but and finding iPad content on YouTube, it just became really depressing because it was the same thing. This needs to be running Mac OS.
It's mainly a bunch of Mac people that are like, let me try this for a week. It's like, oh, It doesn't work for me because I'm a Mac person. This is not my workflow.
Right. So eventually I was just kind of like, all right, well, like I want to try to create iPad content for iPad people. And like, I feel like my goal that I don't know how to get to yet, but the same way there's been a pretty healthy Mac community for 40 years
Yeah.
for the Mac as a platform. I think we don't have that on iPad, really. I mean, there's people out there like you, like Federico Vitici, although I feel like he's more Mac these days, maybe, than iPad, I think.
Yeah, he's moving more to the iPad now with the M4. I think he's flexible,
Sure.
But yeah, with the MacPad, as I've created a MacPad as well, it's very eye-opening how well
Yeah.
all of these platforms can just play together and bounce between each other, which is interesting kind of perspective to start realizing.
But you guys are kind of the only ones out there kind of, again, just kind of the community, the iPad community is kind of just with you guys because you are, more positive on the iPad.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a potential for a bigger iPad community. And that's something I want to foster kind of in the same way that there's a Mac community. Like, I don't know what that looks like yet, but that's kind of my end goal with everything I'm doing is to build an iPad community for, whether you're like you, using it more for productive uses, or if you just bought an iPad to watch Netflix, right? Like, it's all good. It's all
entertainment device, PS remote play, and gaming on the iPad, Death Stranding or whatever as it runs on that thing now.
It's just as valid to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I'm building towards. That's kind of my goal. And I can promise you, like, I'm one of those people who, never say never, but I can promise you'll never, like, when everyone else on YouTube who's on iPad right now, because the M4s came out, once the M4 MacBook Pros come out and they do their big, I'm switching back to MacBook Pro. Like, I don't use iPad I use iPad because I want to, because it is the tool I enjoy using and I can get work done with it, but it's not like an experiment. It's not like I'm going to switch to Mac in 6. Like, no, I've been here for years. I'm not going anywhere. And like, I think there's just a lot of like so much untapped potential here. And it's a space I'm interested in. So I'm sticking around.
No, very cool. And I forgot to ask, actually, Stage Manager and split screen.
Yeah.
You mentioned with the 13-inch, that's when Stage Manager made sense and the bigger one made sense. Do you find yourself using split screen more or Stage Manager? Or what's kind of your use of that?
On the 13, I'm probably, it seems like such a low-hanging fruit, but
yeah,
more or less, if I put it in the Magic Keyboard, I turn on Stage Manager. And that really should be able to happen automatically, even if
it's not even I'd love a shortcut trigger. If keyboard is attached, turn on Stage Manager. It's a trigger.
Yeah, exactly. Seems like a easy thing, but so that's kind of how I use that. And then if I'm just using it in my hands, I'm using split view, slide over.
Yeah.
The multitasking menu, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Split screen. I kind of love split screen. It just feels so elegant. If you're just using two apps, it's like a flow state, just like dragging stuff, dropping it on the side. Like it's just very elegant. If when you need use 4 apps at a time, it's certainly nice to have Stage Manager as an option because that works well too.
I really hope they remove that 4 app limit, at least on the displays.
It's kind of ridiculous.
I can kind of
on the
understand
external monitor.
On the external, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. But I can kind of understand it on the iPad screen, kind of. But at the same time, let's let Windows be smaller and allow you to have more stuff. And But anyways, where can people follow you online, watch your videos, and all that good stuff?
So the channel is just called SlatePad on YouTube. And then slatepad.org is the site where I try to write there. I do a little bit of the link listing thing, like just linking the interesting things, but generally it's where I post my thoughts on kind of, iPad, but really we had this idea of the post-PC device, and like we don't hear that term much anymore, but that's kind of my interest, is that whole space of like iPad, Apple Watch, Vision Pro, whatever's next. And right now the focus is on iPad because I don't have infinite funds. I can't just go buy everything I want to try, but that is the goal, is to explore all that. So, and then on Threads, I'm pretty active at SlatePad.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Riley, so much for your time today. It's been a great chat and really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's my interview with Riley. Check out his work at slatepad.org. My thanks again to Riley for his time recording. And my thanks again to Agenda for sponsoring this episode of iPad Pros. Learn more at www.agenda.com. Download Agenda 19 today for free from the App Store to get started with the app that I use to plan and organize all of the interviews I do for my podcasts. And thank you for your time and attention tuning in. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.